Clinical trials are the absolute bedrock of modern medicine. But honestly, they're in crisis. The way we've always done things, just focusing on rules and regulations, it's just not working anymore. So today, we're going to look at a new model that completely flips the script. It's all about merging that strict operational side with deep scientific excellence, building a real partnership to fix one of medicine's biggest headaches.
Okay, but before we get to the solution, we have to really truly understand the scale of the problem we're up against. Modern drug development is facing this crisis of cost and complexity, and the numbers, well, they're just staggering.
Just look at this number, $2.6 billion. That's the average price tag to get one single new drug from a lab into your local pharmacy. And a massive piece of that pie, something like 60%, is spent just on the clinical development part. The stakes really could not be higher.
So how in the world does a trial get so expensive? This diagram here shows us exactly how. It's what's called a vicious cycle of complexity. It all starts at the top, right, with more and more complex protocols. That puts a huge burden on the investigators, which then leads to the next step, recruitment delays and failures. And that, of course, drives up the costs, which just traps the entire system in this incredibly expensive, inefficient loop.
And here's the real kicker. The traditional model just hasn't kept up. It's built for a different era, one focused on rules, checking data, making sure you're compliant. All that is essential, don't get me wrong. But it creates a huge gap because it often lacks the deep scientific expertise you need to have a real conversation about today's super complex science.
And this gap? It becomes crystal clear when we look at the two main people supporting a clinical trial site. It's really a tale of two completely different approaches. You've got the traditional monitor on one side and the collaborative peer on the other.
So on one side, you have the clinical research associate, the CRA. We'll call them the monitor. Their job is all about operations, auditing data, verifying forms, making sure every rule is followed. But then you have the medical affairs professional. Let's call them the peer. Their role is totally different. It's scientific, it's educational, and it's built on a true peer-to-peer partnership.
And this table just breaks down that difference perfectly. The monitor, the CRA, has this evaluative style. Their main focus is auditing. It's kind of like getting a report card, right? And what happens when you're getting graded? Well, it can lead investigators to kind of hide problems because they don't want a bad grade. But the peer, the medical affairs pro, takes a collaborative, non-judgmental approach. And that encourages investigators to speak up early about concerns, to ask for guidance, and it turns problems into opportunities to solve things together.
And this gets right to the heart of it. This quote absolutely nails the superpower of the medical affairs role. It's all about creating psychological safety. Because the relationship isn't about being graded, investigators feel safe. They feel safe enough to be open about challenges, to ask the tough questions, and to admit when they need a little help. And believe me, that open dialogue is a total game changer for a trial's success.
All right, so we've laid out the problem and we've met our key players. Now let's look at how this powerful partnership actually works in the real world to solve that massive crisis we started with.
Now, a big question that always comes up is, yeah, but is this compliant? And the answer is absolutely. 100%. Because this isn't about breaking rules. It's about defining rules. This traffic light framework makes it incredibly clear. Red light activities, like verifying data, are strictly for clinical ops, completely off limits for medical affairs. Yellow light stuff means proceed with caution, but the green light activities, things like scientific discussions, educational support, that's exactly where they should be focused. It creates a clear, safe, and totally compliant way to work together.
So let's take a little tour and see how this partnership adds value at every single stage of a clinical trial's life, from the very first idea all the way to the finish line.
We can break the whole thing down into 4 key stages, right? You've got the pre-study design phase, then that critical enrollment period, then the day-to-day study conduct, and finally, completion.
It all starts here, before the trial even kicks off. Instead of designing a protocol in a bubble, this model works like a funnel. It pulls in all this critical, real-world information from medical affairs, what doctors are actually doing, how patients are really being treated, and it injects that intelligence right into the protocol design. This helps you build a smarter, more practical study from day one, which saves a ton of money on painful changes down the road.
Next up, enrollment. And this graph tells you everything you need to know. See that dotted line? In the traditional model, the investigator's engagement just plummets after all the initial excitement wears off. But look at the solid line. In the strategic model, you get this continuous pulse of scientific engagement that keeps motivation high for the long haul. That sustained momentum is absolutely crucial.
So then,
During the study itself, the two roles work in perfect parallel. This picture shows it so well. On the left, you've got clinical ops handling all the red line tasks, the data checks, the process compliance. But at the exact same time, on the right, you have medical affairs handling the green zone stuff, the scientific questions, the medical context, the education. They're like two separate teams working side by side with one single goal, making that investigator successful.
And finally, at the end of it all, the partnership delivers its ultimate value. Medical affairs becomes this kind of translation bridge. They help take the raw statistical data from one side and turn it into meaningful, real-world clinical practice on the other. They make sure the results of the trial don't just end up in some medical journal, but actually change how patients get treated.
So, what's the bottom line here? What's the big payoff? Well, it really points to a whole new future for clinical trials, one that's built on collaboration, not just on compliance.
I mean, the benefits are just so clear. This integrated model speeds up enrollment and shortens timelines. It reduces the number of sites that give up and drop out. It makes the data better because investigators actually have a deeper understanding of the science. And, like we just saw, it builds that critical bridge from a statistic on a page to a real, meaningful change for patients. And that really leaves us with one final crucial question. As science gets more and more complex and these costs just keep climbing, you really have to ask yourself, is this kind of deep strategic collaboration not just a nice idea, but maybe the only real cure we have for the challenges facing modern medicine? What do you think?